had that feeling, the stars were our ceiling, past the edge of town, cause we had nothing else to do. Dreaming in full color, loving like no other. No wasted days when I was wasting them with you. I was wasting them when you were showing me fake love that I couldn't see was true. Left me with these memories. Now I'm missing somebody I knew, and I know it wasn't you. Why'd you have to fall like that? Caught me into, and tell me that you love me, keep me dancing, and whisper that you want me so bad. Got me thinking we could last forever. I'll blink if you're gone. Why'd you have to fall like going round in circles, tripping over hurdles, looking for the answer in the spots we used to go to. Now it's all but over, every breath is colder. Look over my shoulder, now I see what I fell into. Now I see you were showing me fake love that I couldn't see wasn't true. Left me with these memories. Now I'm missing somebody I knew, and I know it wasn't you.
A real clockwork soldier.
Generation Orange in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Generation Orange. My name is Edson Ochoa, and I'm accompanied, like always, by my good friend and co-host, Sean Ringrose. Did you all miss us? What's up, Sean?
I sure missed you guys. It's been what, like 2 weeks? It feels like 3 weeks.
I think it was 2.
I've lost track. I don't know.
With you, I believe it's been 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So, obviously a lot's happened in 3 weeks, but there's a few really, 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 really important things that we should definitely talk about. So this week we're going to talk, obviously, Dynamo, specifically talking about the atrocity that was the Portland match, and then the even bigger atrocity, in my opinion, that was the New England Revolution match.
See, it has to be that bad for Sean to use those words for a Dynamo match.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. And as always, guys, we know you have plenty to talk about. Phone lines are open, 956-622-5977.
There it is.
That is Edson's cue to connect and turn them on.
It's connected.
I've had people actually message me on Twitter saying they wanted to call in this week, so wanted to make sure we got that running early this week. So we're going to talk Dynamo. We're going to talk quite a bit of Dynamo because I know that's kind of hot and fresh on everybody's mind. I do want to talk a little bit about Women's World Cup and the U.S. Women's National Team and Alex Morgan's celebration, goal celebration from today's match against England. So we will talk about that later as well. And I also want to talk a little bit about we'll get some RGV in there, but what was the other thing, Edson? Help me out here.
The rumor of Mauro Menounos.
Yes, actually that's not it, but yes, we need to talk about that too. I need to squash that rumor that is circulating right now.
What are you talking about? That's what makes this transfer window fun.
Yeah, silly season is definitely alive and well.
Yep.
No, and that's all part of the Dynamo talk, talking about Elise and Morrow and possible things that may take place this window, what I expect, what I think we'll see, what Edson thinks we'll see, and kind of where we go from here.
Sorry, Darby.
Lastly, we're going to talk about the new pricing tiers and the expansion of the supporters group sections for 2020.
I hope you can enlighten me because I am completely confused about what's going on with that.
I will enlighten you, don't worry. So we will get to those towards the end of the show. I'm saving those for the end because they're going to probably be pretty hot topics. I know quite a few people have opinions on them, and so I definitely want to give some time for that as well.
So be sure to share it on social media, guys, because I know there's been a lot of concerns, a lot of rants happening on the Twitterverse. So be sure to share it, and hopefully we can answer some questions. You know, it would have been a perfect episode to have Jay Adelberg on.
You know, it would have been, but a lot of them are either out of town or busy this week because they're both prepping for tomorrow's match, but also it's a holiday week, and so they're prepping to go out of town. So I just did not want to try to toss this on top of everything else he has going on right now. And then obviously with them releasing early this week the pricing changes, the extra tiers, all that. I know he's been fielding a lot of phone calls, and sales and service has been fielding a lot of phone calls and emails and texts and tweets and everything else. And so I just want to make sure that when we do get Jay on, that he has time to actually be on and you know, give his kind of full. And so this week is just not a good week to do that. And I knew that and didn't even worry about it.
All right.
Darby says, well, you know, y'all got me out of the Tuesday night habit with all the weeks off. Hey, we know. I frankly blame the Dynamo and the Open Cup having those 2 Tuesday night matches in a row, and me then having being unable to do the show last week, and obviously having weirdness with co-hosting issues last week, resulting in Edson getting to do a gaming live stream, which is pretty cool. Something I, you know, like that he was actually able to do, but definitely throws things off for sure. We also know it's the summer, so things are kind of already in flux to begin with, but we hope that going forward we can remain on Tuesday nights as long as there's not another Tuesday night match, which I don't think there's another one this season, so I think we're good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Darby says Cisco has to be here for the Morgan talk. He'll want to point out that Giles did it first. And she's not wrong. I know Cisco, and I know that is absolutely the truth. And I did call him out on Twitter, so hopefully he heeds the call. And if he doesn't, I'll text him here in about 15 minutes and try to get him to chime in, because I know we all know he's opinionated. So, but all right, you know, let's talk about the Dynamo. Let's talk about the Dynamo going back the last 5 matches. 4 losses, 1 draw. 4 losses, 1 draw. Yeah, you've said that already. I heard you. So, Edson, let me get your take first, and then I'll give my take, and I hope those in chat will feel free to chime in with their take on the Dynamo current form, which we all know is exactly as Edson said, the word crap. Go ahead, Edson.
My biggest concern continues to be our depth. I feel like, no, we're not sponsored by Subway. Might as well get that taken care of right now.
Never say never, Edson. Never.
Yeah, true.
Eat fresh.
All right, go ahead, Edson. We're being demonetized. Bye, guys. So, to me, my biggest issue with these couple of matches, especially with during the Gold Cup matches, where we did not have our Hondurans, where we did not have Darwin Seren, where we did not have Kiki Struna, AJD with FIFA international window. It seemed like the ones that were supposed to step up that were behind them when their name was called to be on the starting 11 just didn't show up. And it doesn't matter whether it was Open Cup. We talked about that, a tale of two halves. It was ridiculous. And it seemed like it happened the same thing against Portland, where, in the first half, they were able to kind of limit on what Portland could do. Yes, Portland seemed dangerous, but it seemed like the Houston Dynamo were able to kind of minimize the danger. And then in the second half, like, all hell broke loose with Portland scoring what ended up being a 4-0 loss at Portland. To me, it just seems like, number one, who keeps on thinking that Tommy Mack out on the wing is a good idea? Number two, it seems to me like Thomas is going through a really, really bad spell, to a point where I'm asking myself if we really need to play with a central attacking midfield, or Wilmer should try a different formation that does not require a center attacking midfield, especially now that the Hondurans are coming back, that Kyoto and Elise are coming back. If we're going to be playing with counterattack, do we really need a distributor, especially a distributor that right now, number one, has nobody behind him to kind of put pressure on him in the position, and number two, he's not really going through a good spell, to a point where he is more talked about in the matches about his rants against the referees rather than what he does on the field. So should Coach Wilmer Cabrera try a different formation? We don't know, but something needs to be done, especially on the road. My biggest concern right now is if this bad run of form is going to affect our morale, especially at home. Right now, I am honestly very, very frustrated. To me, I don't know if it should be a call to attention to Coach Wilmer Cabrera, but definitely for the players that were here throughout this dry spell, because it seemed they never learned their lesson.
All right. So, as much as Portland and New England were atrocities, and this last five have been abysmal at best, there are positives that I take out of these last five. Number one, I do think that we now see and know without a shadow of a doubt how vital Albert Elise and Mauro Manotas and even Memo Rodriguez, and I would even extend that a bit to Romel Kyoto, how important they are. Mm-hmm. I also I also take some solace in the fact that Portland match, two of those goals should have been VAR overturned. Fernandez was offsides on one of the goals, and then the other one, there was a foul that wasn't called that should have been called. The PK, specifically the PK that was called on Beasley, should have never been a PK, but they didn't have a good angle on it because #Portland. And then the Brian Fernandez goal, he was offsides, and he was offsides. You could tell if you look at the freeze frame of it, especially when you're looking at it with the lines on the pitch, and there are lines on the pitch, you can tell he's about half a yard off. So that takes it from a 4-0 down to a 2-0, which is still not great, but looks a lot better from an optics standpoint.
Yeah, but that's still losing 3 points, no matter how you cut it.
Sure, absolutely. But this was also Portland's, first or second home match of the season, and they had been playing on the road the entire time. and even then not playing terribly bad their last few games. So they were on the upswing. They weren't missing their top players, whereas we were. There are a lot of factors that fall into that, and they weren't playing on the same lack of rest that we were, which is another very important piece to the puzzle. And they also didn't have to turn around and play the midweek match following their weekend match. All of these things really are a lot of people label them as an excuse or excuses, and sure, you can call them excuses if you want. But when we're talking about sports, it's incredibly important to remember that every team goes through slumps. Every team has periods of where they're riding high and their form is great, and every team has periods where they're not, where their form dips a bit. And if our form dips specifically when we're without our top players, then I can accept that, because other teams' forms dip even when they have their best players. And so again, there are positives to take out of it. Now, I had said going into this away stretch that I wanted to come out of this realistically with 4 to 5 points. And that would be a couple of draws and a win. That would be a couple of wins, 5 draws if it would work out that way, whatever. But that would be essentially a win and 2 draws or 2 wins. That's essentially how it would have shaken out. That hasn't happened, and I don't believe that. I mean, it hasn't happened, and it's not going to happen at this point because there's no matches left for this stretch. But we're also coming back home, to a place that we are typically dominant, especially when we have Elise and Morrow playing together. And on top of that, we're getting back one of our best defenders, who frankly is one of the best defenders in MLS when paired with Kiki Struna, in Minor Figueroa. And when those two are playing next to each other, frankly, the entire match, no matter who the opposition is totally different. And it really doesn't matter who's in front of them in the midfield, because they control the match. And so from a defensive standpoint. So I get the frustration. And frankly, I'm not going to say that you shouldn't be frustrated. Again, I wanted better performances. But we always knew that as much as we favored our depth, that our depth compared to starters on other teams was still not going to be as good as starters on other teams. And that's what we were left with, was mostly depth. And I think if there's one thing that I'm most frustrated by, it is the fact that consistently our depth, and again, we've talked about this, Edson, as being a systemic problem more so than a specific player or a specific coach or a specific tactical thing. It appears to be a systemic problem where if we have a lead or don't have a lead, it doesn't matter going into the final 15 minutes of a match. We're likely to surrender a goal when our starters are not playing. And that does concern and bother me a little bit, because it shows that not so much that we don't know how to finish out a match, but that we tend to either kind of go into this attitude and mentality of, okay, cool, the match is about to be over, I can let up a little bit, that kind of thing. Or we get lulled into a sense of complacency towards the end of matches, or mentally we're just not tough enough. I'm not sure which of those things it is, but it's a systemic issue and not specifically a player issue.
Sometimes I feel like this is a mentality problem, because not only are we seeing this that when in second halves they completely fall, but we saw it against Portland. We saw it where bad calls and where they were getting under skin. You got Tomas Martinez give out a stupid yellow card because he got lucky that, as far as what I believe is, he didn't get the yellow card for throwing the ball into the ground, but rather he kept on arguing with the referee, and that's why he gave him the yellow. I mean, if you've already known that, which throwing the ball is technically a yellow card offense for a lot of referees, not only in MLS with pro refs, but throughout the world. If you've already gotten lucky with that, why do you keep on continuing to argue with the ref? Of course, he's gonna give you the yellow card, and it's those kind of little things from a couple of our players, especially Tomas recently. Where you're like, wait, have we not learned like the lesson from last year where we had that same problem with red cards and suspensions? Like, what's it gonna take, like, for them to get on the groove, and be professional 90 plus minutes and keep your cool? Like, where is this something that Coach Wilmer Cabrera hasn't been able to instill on the players? Is it because we lack some sort of leadership, which I highly doubt? But it's really worrisome that after a season and a half of some of these players, you still have these. We're still having these issues of losing our minds for bad calls or for things not going well, or just like you say, just checking out in the last couple of minutes of the match.
So there's a couple of things that you said, and I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate. One is Tomas's quote unquote hot-headedness. And I want to throw it out there because I don't think a lot of people think this way, but it's the captain's responsibility, whoever is the captain for the match, to take control of situations like that. And I feel like Boney is a quiet leader, especially when he's captain. Now, he'll occasionally get demonstrative if he's the guy fouled or he's the guy that's been called for a foul that he feels should not have been a foul. But he doesn't really tend to stick up for his teammates when he's captain the way that, say, a Beasley does, or the way that, like, a Minor Figueroa would. He's much more of a quiet leader. And I don't think enough of that is taken into account because – look, Tomas is getting frustrated because, A, he doesn't get the calls that a lot of other players get in the same games that they're playing in. And on the flip side of it, people get pissed off because he gets pissed off about it. And yet we see players that do the exact same thing, but because they're a name player in the league or they're a known name, they don't get the card. They don't get the same reaction or response from the referee. And to me, that's a total double standard. And to expect a player to be okay with that, a player who we know has a competitive streak to him, to me, that's a little absurd. And look, I know I'm kind of defending Tomas, and I'm the first one that right now feels like Tomas is not the answer at attacking mid. I definitely want to see a change there long term. But I also think that we need to be wary to not get into the mindset that we have to have the perfect attacking mid to be the best team that we can be. I don't think that's the case. I think Tomas is good enough to take us where we want to go as an attacking midfielder because we don't necessarily rely on our attacking midfielder. But again, part of that too is whoever's holding that captain's armband has to know that Tomas is a little hot-headed, Kyoto's a little hot-headed, Alberth Elise can be a little hot-headed, and that these guys need someone who's going to be willing to vocally step in and say, look, let me take the heat, let me be the one to vocalize that we're frustrated. You guys, just let me be that guy. You don't need to take it into your own hands. Let me deal with it, and if I'm the one that has to take a yellow card for it, so be it. But I'll be that leader. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like Boniak's not that guy. And look, I love the way Boniak's playing right now. But he doesn't have to be the captain just because he's got the experience. A captain needs to have more than the experience, more than that veteranness. They need to have the leadership.
And who takes the decision of who the captain's going to be?
That comes from Wilmer. And it's always been with Wilmer. It's always just the most experienced guys. It's the most experienced guys in MLS. That's how he decides captaincy. Period. End of the day, that's exactly how he decides captaincy. And it frustrates me because it shouldn't be that way. I'm fine when Beasley has the band because he is that kind of guy that will get up there and tell the ref, like, that's not a foul, dude. Like, that sort of thing, etc. But like I said, Boniak's never been that type of guy. And I know Tomas is not going to be that type of guy because he's too hot-headed. Elise is not going to be the guy. So it either needs to be a defender or it needs to be a midfielder. And, I thought before Cabezas' injuries that he could have been the guy. I didn't have a better word for it, Cisco, I know. I thought Cabezas could have been that guy, but he's not with the injuries. The current order is Beasley, OBG, and Figueroa, and it's all based on their experience and veterans. Yeah, their seniority, if you will. Even though theoretically Figueroa should be ahead of them, just based on his seniority. But it never really comes from who's the better leader. It has nothing to do with that, I think, at the end of the day. It would probably go to Tommy Mack after Figueroa. Let's be totally honest. God. It would.
Yeah.
Let's read through some of these chat messages, though, because there was a lot while we were talking. So Darby says, I've never been Team Tommy. He's too inconsistent. Definitely can't argue that. Cisco says, the only thing that bothered me about the Portland match was the fact that they scheduled the USOC match against Mini to have an extra day of rest for Portland, and then we got obliterated 4-0. I get that, and I think if they had to do it over again, and it's different, obviously, if going in that you're A, not going to have certain starters, and B, that your sub players are not going to play to their potential, then I think you're more likely to just keep it on the Wednesday instead of scheduling it for the Tuesday, and just deal with it. And Cisco says, and that forced many people to miss the Open Cup match, which could have really been the X factor, having more fans at that match. I don't know if a Tuesday versus a Wednesday for the Open Cup match would have made that big of a difference because, frankly, nobody shows up for Open Cup unless it's like deep into the Open Cup tournament. Darby says the timing couldn't be helped, but all these ticket changes would have landed much better with a little better recent record. Definitely agreed. I think if the team had better form going in, it would have been different. But the fact that we're talking about a 5-match stretch that really at the time of the USOC match was only 3 matches. The fact that we're saying that is enough to get people to not come out to matches, that right there is a problem from a fan, that's a problem in terms of the perspective looking at it at the fan base. If that's enough to cause fans not to show up, then we've got bigger problems than the team form. Cisco said, Darby also said, our guys let the bad calls get under their skin, and then they lose concentration and make stupid mistakes. I definitely agree with that to some extent, but I think it's not just, a single player. I think there's a few players that are that way. And again, those things fall under whoever's got that captain's band. It's his responsibility to change that, to deal with that. And I think that's the thing we're missing right now is that true veteran leader who isn't Beasley. And again, I like Beasley as the captain most times, but when these things happen, he's just not that guy that's going to make the difference on the field.
Do we even have anybody like that?
Not right now because we're such a young team. I think Albert Elise in 3 or 4 years could be that guy, but he's not going to be that guy anytime soon because he gets just as frustrated. Cisco says people get on the Dynamo because we lost to the second worst team in the West, without failing to mention that Portland opened the season with 11 or so road matches. And that's
I don't think I saw anybody say that they were mad because we lost to Portland because they were second worst team.
Oh no, I saw it a bunch. I saw it on Twitter. I saw it on Facebook. I saw it in the Dynamo Reddit.
Because most of the people that I've looked at on Twitter have said that the reason they were mad is because of the terrible form that these bench players were playing.
We obviously follow different people. Like I said, I did see it, so I know it was out there. And it wasn't everybody saying that, but there was a good contingency of people that I saw that specifically were frustrated because, oh man, it was Portland. They're the worst, second worst team in the West. But in reality, like I said, I mean, positioning in the table doesn't matter until towards the end of the season. And especially when a team starts with 11 road matches. I mean, if we started with 11 road matches, our record would be like, 1-0 and 10. type of thing. I mean, it'd just be that's win, tie, loss, for what it's worth.
We get you.
Yeah. Sergio says if we had our starters, we would win that New England match. Cisco says I'm not worried and don't see it as a problem because these mistakes were committed by bench players for the most part, and that's why they are where they are and why they are what they are. I agree. That's the reason most of the RGV players are RGV players and not Dynamo players, and why Dynamo subs are not starters.
Well, some RGV players have played better than a couple of MLS.
You're not wrong.
Players, and
eventually,
that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and eventually they're going to get called up and signed, and RGV will be stuck with the crap players that the Dynamo have.
So basically, this relationship isn't working like it should. Is that what you're saying?
We'll get to that later. Darby says, I think Salazar has a lot of potential. I'd like to see what he will do with the Honduran. Wilmer will put him in. So I agree. Michael Salazar, to me, has been the bright spot off the bench. And I'll be honest, I would much rather see him the first sub off the bench until Memo is healthy than Tommy Mack. So at this point, I am just completely done with Tommy Mack.
So, I was actually on the Wednesday night after that Portland match, I was talking with my cousin, and he was telling me from what he saw from Salazar, like he seemed to me like he would be like the kind of striker to accompany Mauro Manotas coming in from behind, playing a more of a 4-4-2 formation, him playing as a post because of his strength, because of his technical abilities of controlling the ball, being able to retain defenders from shield defenders from the ball. That could help. That he felt like that would help, like Mauro Manotas be a lot more in facing direction of goal, and rather than having his back or just waiting for a cross by Albert Elise. He could also help, distribute because of the way he shields the ball to distribute the ball to either Elise or Kyoto, and then being able to cross it into either Salazar or Mauro. And I definitely agree. I think we've seen the qualities of Michael Salazar like that when he played with RGV, and then the couple of matches that he's played with the Dynamo. There were a couple of times in the Portland match where he had like 2 or 3 Portland players trying to take the ball away, even against Minnesota, trying to take the ball away from him, and they had a very hard time. They either fouled him or they weren't able to take the ball away from Michael Salazar. Sure, his touching recently in these couple of games hasn't really been, that great sometimes, but I think I saw a lot more positives from Michael Salazar than negatives. You just got to give him time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think my thing with Michael Salazar right now, and it's a positive, not a negative, is that he possesses the ball far better than most of our wingers actually do. I feel like he possesses the ball better than Elise or Kyoto, to be totally honest with you. Mm-hmm. I like when I see him turn and move inside and not run straight at the defense, but instead let the other winger and Mauro and even Tomas or whoever else is there in the middle make that run into the box and stay central a little bit to give himself 3 or 4 different pass options instead of just one pass option, either back to AJ or whoever's playing right back, or inside to Tomas, as the case may be, or back to a centerman, I guess. I like when he does that. And when he does it, it usually pulls 2 defenders with him. So even if he does go back to AJ has a pretty free run at the box, pulling a center back out, which again, talking tactically, if you're pulling 2 defenders with Michael Salazar, you're pulling an extra defender with AJ. That's going to leave Mauro or Memo or Kyoto or whoever's the other winger and whoever's that striker, and Tomas especially, if all those guys are running in the box and running towards goal, there's at least one of those guys that's going to be open.
And we saw that with RGV with him and Malik Foster pulling the marking from the other team, that you would see Chewy, just with his technical ability, just trying to look for that shot or trying to look for that pass inside, cutting back inside. And I just feel like it's just going to take a lot more time for him to get used to his teammates to get used to his style, for it to kind of gel. But I think he brings something different. I think it's a breath of fresh air, and I think it would help this team if Wilmer decides to be more possession based. It's one small little piece, but I think it's one little piece can be very, very helpful as long as everybody else is on the same boat as him.
So Sergio mentioned something here. He says Hairston lets me down more and more every game. And I want to point something out, and this is something that's going to tie into, I said we were going to talk about it a little bit later. Well, now's later. You said earlier that the pipeline, if ultimately the end result is Dynamo sign RGV players and then send the worst Dynamo players down, that's not really making the pipeline the way that it should be. And here's the thing. If Michael Salazar is coming up and he's showing that he can be a good enough player to stay on the Dynamo bench, why don't we send a player like Hairston down to RGV? Sure, he's not a young player, but he may need time with the system.
Correct.
And with the style of play, instead of thrusting him in at MLS level and expecting him to adapt on a dime. And I just think that would benefit him. And what I'm trying to get at with that is
as long as they, and we keep on going back to this issue, as long as we have them there week in and week out for a couple of weeks, then it should work.
I'm talking like a couple of months. I'm talking like 8 matches or 6 matches, or 7 matches.
I think that would be great. Because he'll get his confidence back. He does have MLS experience, and we could now that Malik Foster's going to be gone, we could use somebody with his experience. Now, but if it's going to be the same old of just having in there like the game and then having to come back to Houston, and not knowing, and Coach Cheverry not knowing who he's going to get during the week, then yes, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and and we talked about it on Down in the Valley a few weeks back when we did was it the crossover episode? I don't know. We talked about it. Crossover episode, which was Down in the Valley. That's what we called it. It was Down in the Valley with guest hosts from Gen Orange. But we talked about that same thing, that really if the RGV pipeline is going to work like it should, if that relationship is going to work like it should work, then it needs to be something where there needs to be an expectation that when we send the player down to RGV, that player is going to spend a minimum of 3 matches or 4 matches down there, instead of we're going to send him down and call him right back up again as soon as that match is over.
Yeah.
It would reduce travel on the players, which reduces the amount of fatigue and wear and tear on their bodies and mental state, and psychological state, which goes into mental state.
Yeah.
But it would also, it would give us a kind of, again, and I've said this before too, when players get sent down to in MLB to the minor leagues, and again, I view USL as the USL Championship is kind of like the minor leagues of MLS right now. But when they send players down, when the Astros send a player down, if it's for a rehab assignment, they're there for a few games. It's not, he's going to play 1 game and then he'll be right back again.
We saw it with Altuve recently.
Yeah, he was there for a few games. And, the same thing is true with the NBA and the D League, which I'm looking at that going, how can the Dynamo try to facilitate this so differently when this relationship has worked with the Rockets
and the Vipers?
Because in the Vipers, well, that's what I was referring to, RGV and the
I know,
the Rockets.
But I just want you to say Vipers.
The Vipers. Oh no, I love the Vipers. And mind you, the coach of the Vipers, who was there during their championship run not that long ago for the D League championship, was part of the Toronto front office that just won the NBA championship.
Nick Nurse.
Nick Nurse.
And now Coach Blair is now going to be assistant coach at the 76ers.
Exactly. But my point is, before we get too far off track and start talking basketball like we're a basketball podcast, is that though, if they have this example of the relationship and how it works in basketball, and they have it as an example in how it works in baseball, why are they trying to reinvent the wheel
exactly
for soccer when we've seen it work when you give the player time and let them adjust to actually playing there? This whole mentality that I've got to have that player back to practice with me because that's the senior team way. it doesn't make any sense to me from a mentality standpoint. It doesn't make any sense from a confidence standpoint, because you're essentially saying to that player, you're not good enough to start for our team, but we want you to be in our practices. So they already know they're not going to be the best player out there. So they're never going to get that confidence back until they get a chance to start again. And so it's just, and it doesn't give time for players to gel. It doesn't give time for the younger players who absolutely need the experience to play with better veteran players. It doesn't give a chance for the RGV fans to actually get to see a player for 3 or 4 matches in a row. I mean, imagine if Memo was an RGV for 3 weeks in a row, for 3 matches in a row. And even if it was just 1 or 2 home matches, but they had time to advertise for 3 weeks in a row. Imagine what that would do for fans. That would get fans a little bit excited. Mm-hmm. And imagine if they did that with a Hairston. Send down a Marlon Hairston for 3 matches, just to get that time back in there, to get that comfort level, to get a chance to play with some different players. Sometimes a player just needs a change of scenery. And that's not to say it's a permanent change of scenery, but it's just something that just kickstarts that switch in his head to mentally get back what he's missing. And we all know that Marlon Hairston has a ton of potential. Even still, he's got a ton of potential, and he has that second gear and that second level, but we haven't seen it with the Dynamo this season to date. And I think a lot of that falls back to the fact that the way the RGV thing is set up, I think because of that, there's a couple of things that happen. One, Wilmer doesn't feel comfortable or confident sending his players down for more than 1 match at a time. And 2, I don't feel like the player wants to go down because he sees it as basically relegation duty. Whereas I feel like if it was viewed more as like the minor league baseball or the D League, style of thing, where it's not just for that, it's for rehab assignments and that sort of thing, I think the confidence of the player stays a lot higher. And so I don't know. It seems to me like when a player goes down to RGV for a match or 2, he comes back and he's not the same player. And it's not RGV's fault whatsoever. It's the system and the way that the Dynamo are approaching it. And that falls on Matt Jordan, the ownership, and whoever's managing that relationship from the Dynamo aspect.
Yeah, the problem is I highly doubt that Matt Jordan or even Wilmer Cabrera sees this. That's the biggest issue that I have.
I think they do see it. I think they just can't seem to figure out how to fix it. And I think part of it is that.
But you just came up with a solution in like 5 minutes, and they're the experts. Like,
you're not wrong, but I also think because we've seen Matt Jordan succeed when it comes to Montreal's USL team. When he was up there and Montreal had their USL team, and he was basically feeding the USL team with players. That was successful, and it was because they had that type of system where the player would spend time with Montreal's USL team instead of immediately coming up after the match was over. That just doesn't work. And I think if Matt Jordan had his way and Wilmer would just be willing to give in a little bit, that the payoff would be great. I actually think this is a Wilmer issue, not a Matt Jordan issue. I think Wilmer is the one who immediately calls the player back as soon as they send a player down.
Sergio, you're 100% correct. That's basically how it is. Thursday, Friday makes the drive down to RGV, plays 45, 70, 90 minutes with RGV. Next day on Sunday, have to drive back to Houston. Monday, be at practice with the Dynamo.
Yep. And normally that's not Thursday, Friday. Normally that's sent down on Friday.
Yeah. I know Eric Bird said that once in a post-game interview last season.
I've heard AJ say it as well. So yes. I know it's the fact that they get told Friday after practice is over, and that's morning practice. Friday after morning practice is over, hey, you're going down to RGV for the match this weekend. You need to be there at this time. And basically they report for the match, and that's it. They don't report for even the practice beforehand. Now, sometimes the player will get there early enough because they leave that night. They leave Friday night to get there, Saturday morning to be able to do that kind of early walkthrough with the team. But for the most part, those players don't even get time to practice with those RGV players.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was sold as a good thing for why this relationship was going to work well, and one of the things that I was told repeatedly and saw in a lot of different kind of write-ups on the way this was going to work, was that the RGV players and Dynamo players would practice together throughout the week.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing is not that. Instead, they have two totally separate practices, which I don't think is a bad thing. But because they have these separate practices and they don't ever meet up until the player makes it there for a Saturday match, that's not the way forward for anybody. That's terrible for the player. That's terrible for the teams. That's terrible for the coaches. That's terrible for the technical side of things. I mean, it just doesn't work. We know it doesn't work because if it worked, baseball would do that. NBA would do that. NHL would do that. They don't because they've been at this long enough to know that doesn't work. Players have to have time to recover mentally and physically. And if you're expecting them to make that drive and then turn around and make the drive after the match is over, that's just unfair to the player. And frankly, I hope that it gets addressed quickly.
So in other words, the virus in this sickness of this pipeline is Wilmer.
I would like to say yes. I want to believe that's the case. I do believe that is the case. But I can't say that for sure because I haven't seen any different because we haven't had another coach to really compare it to. We had Coyle, who had that opportunity, but it was so early on in the tenure of RGVs and everything that wasn't a good enough kind of baseline to base everything on. Mm-hmm. And Wade Barrett was so short and didn't have a lot of authority that that was never going to be any different either. But, you know, I just, like you said, I feel like if I can come up with a solution like that, that's super simple and super easy to implement, I would like to know why, you know, what is the thought? I wish Matt Jordan would address this or Wilmer would address this, whoever it is that makes these decisions. What is the thought process behind the way they do it currently? And why haven't they at least tried to do it this other way to see if it, you know, if it works differently?
Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead. Finish.
I was just going to say, I would like to see someone ask that question to Matt Jordan or to Wilmer Cabrera. I don't know, maybe post-match during the press conference. I don't know. Just throwing it out there. I'd like someone to ask that question. I don't know who that person could be that sits in the press box and then gets a chance to ask questions, maybe even in practice or, I don't know, whenever you get a chance to do that, whomever that may be. You always ask me what questions you should ask. That's a very good question to ask. So Cisco asks, I would be interested to know how other teams handle the sending down of players if they do things similarly.
So here's the difference in that. Let's take a look at MLS2 teams. So MLS2 teams, for the most part, they have their affiliate in the same team, barring Tacoma Defiance and Seattle Sounders now. But even then, like the difference, the distance between Tacoma and Seattle isn't really that much compared to RGV.
It's like an hour.
Yeah, so it's not that bad. So they'll keep their players for a while, and then once one of those players stands out, they'll kind of nudge him into the MLS team. They'll play like 1-2 games, and then they'll send them back to continue to develop with LA Galaxy 2, with Tacoma Defiance, Real Monarchs, etc., etc. Now they would do send some MLS players, but like we said, there's really not a different distance is not really a problem. They're able to kind of go there, practice, whether it's with the first team or with the second team, or maybe even they both practice together, so there's that. With these MLS2 teams, we do see a lot of MLS2 players, get nudged into the first team to kind of get their feet wet on it, and then just continue to let them develop week in and week out with the USL teams. Whereas with the Dynamo, we'll let them play for a couple of minutes. If they stand out, okay, here's your MLS contract. He's mine now. Good luck, RGV, kind of thing.
Yeah. Thomas says, Chicago and Tulsa, in terms of, MLS and USL, and Tulsa isn't Chicago's USL franchise. When we're talking about the USL MLS relationship, we're specifically talking, at least in this aspect, of MLS teams that
having control,
own or have technical control over a USL franchise, such as the Dynamo and RGV, such as San Jose and who's their franchise? Reno. Thank you, Reno.
1868.
Those are hybrid affiliations, and what that really means is it's basically essentially the same thing as if they own the USL franchise. The only difference is they don't manage the business aspects.
Correct. It's almost like it's kind of like a third party kind of thing.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. Sergio says also, if I had to guess, players going between the Rockets and Vipers use a plane. No, a lot of times they actually ride a bus. They ride the bus line, or they drive themselves. If they're a Rockets player making enough money, they drive themselves. But no, they don't fly. And there's no need for them to fly. There really isn't. Sergio makes the point that Cisco brought up
Pittsburgh Riverhouse and Charleston Battery.
Yeah, when they were our affiliates. And Sergio says, at least with Pittsburgh and Charleston, those were season-long loans for the most part.
I think that needs to happen. I don't think that MLS to USL loans should be week in and week out. It should be season-long. I don't
think it should be season-long. Because I think that's too much. But I do think that we could, that realistically it needs to be, like we've said before, a month at minimum. It needs to be at least 3 to 4 matches at minimum. Otherwise, there's no benefit to it. It's the same as sending a player to go play an intramural match at that point, or a college match at that point, because they're not getting any benefit other than just getting a few minutes at a lower level. Whereas at least if they're spending time with that team, they're getting, they're getting the opportunity to be coached by a different coach, B, get a different opportunity, or the opportunity to play with other players, to get their kind of confidence back, a chance to kind of relax away from the kind of fan scrutiny that comes with MLS, a lot of the stresses that come with MLS, things like that. They're getting a chance to get away from all that. And, for some players, and frankly, it helps. It helps to have a time away from whatever it is that is causing the issue. And I just feel like, for whatever reason, the Dynamo are content to try to do it their own way, continue forging their own path forward. And I mean, at this point, we're 3 years in and we've seen it doesn't work this way. It is not a successful relationship this way. The players that have been the most successful are players that spend time with RGV, not play a match with RGV. Memo spent time with RGV. Michael Salazar has spent time with RGV. Players that essentially have been called up and then don't go back to RGV for any length of time, Charlie Ward,
George
Malky, are players that tend not to end up playing for the Dynamo after a couple of seasons, because frankly, it's not a system that works. It doesn't benefit that player. It doesn't benefit the team. Doesn't benefit the coach, because the coaches don't get a chance to coach the player. All they get a chance to do is talk to the player for that one match while they're down at RGV. And it seems to me that if you believe enough in Gerson Echeverri to have him coach RGV, you would believe enough in him to help you develop your youth players. And at this point, I don't think they believe enough in him, because of how they're handling this, to do that. I feel like realistically, if they're going to go this route, they need to have a team here in Houston so that the two teams can practice together. So that's my 2 cents when it comes to that. And it frustrates me like hell, because I believe that there's a lot of talent to be had at the USL level that can get to the MLS level if it's developed properly. And frankly, this system doesn't develop properly. And that's why we have one of the lowest rates of return on USL players or players out of the academy, because frankly, there's no way for them to develop properly once they hit that MLS. Like once they're at that kind of borderline of, I'm good enough to be a top tier USL player, but I'm not quite good enough to be a, consistent substitute at MLS level. There's a difference there. There's a little bit of a gap. And I feel like players fall into that gap and they just get lost in the mix. And you look at a Dom Dwyer. If Dom Dwyer had been in this system, he would have never made it as an MLS player because he would have never gotten the opportunity. So, anyways.
I don't know. It's like, to me, it also helps out Coach Echeverry if he gets more MLS players for a more extended amount of time to kind of help him learn how to coach MLS players. And in case there comes a time where either the Dynamo might need him as an MLS coach, or another team comes knocking at the door wanting him as an MLS coach, he's already got experience, dealing in an extended length of time to coach MLS. It also helps as the development of coaches into MLS. And I feel like that I don't know if it's Wilmer, like you say, or Matt Jordan, that they're too not protective, but they feel like they don't trust a lot outside of Wilmer to deal with MLS. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Like, it just seems so easy and so simple to explain on paper, where you just you're just questioning yourself, like, what the hell is Coach Wilmer Cabrera or Matt Jordan thinking when they make these decisions regarding the RGV pipeline? I mean, you see how successful Brazos Valley Cavalry is against teams that are of their same, under the same circumstances, under 23s. They're very, very successful. Why is it that talent just can't find good footing in USL Championship?
Yeah, no, I agree. And, it just, someone needs to ask the question. Nobody's asked that question before of, why do you immediately call the player back? Why don't you let them actually spend time with RGV? I want to know the answer. Now, let's be real. If somebody does ask that question, we're probably going to get a canned response of some kind.
No, I remember I asked when I first started. I asked a question regarding RGV and its failure with results to Coach Cabrera. He got mad at me.
Well, okay, you got to frame it a specific way.
I know. I framed it I framed it to based on the results. What was the future going to be like, as far as like the first team's involvement with RGV, and all I got was like, that it was a success because they got at that time they got 5 players signed to MLS contracts. So to Coach Cabrera, it doesn't matter, if they do good or if they do bad results-wise in USL. All they care about is how many players can we steal or we take away from RGV. Even if at the end of the day, he didn't really use them, because that's when they got Charlie, that's when they got Malky, that's when they got Kevin, that's when they got Eric Bird. So I'm trying to remember who else they got at that time, but it was around 5 players. But yeah, you just saw like his face completely change, and just looked and his tone like changed. It was like, no, it's a success. Because we've got 5 players from MLS signed to the Houston Dynamo. I mean, like, come on, like, you would assume that a player's success, if they're successful in USL, that makes them closer or at a closer level to be MLS reserves or MLS bench ready. Because if you can excel in USL, then you're closer to the gap, to the limit between being an MLS reserve player. And it seems like they got these players, but then their development tanked because they saw 0 minutes with the Houston Dynamo, and they were very reluctant to even loan them back to RGV.
Well, and that's the thing, right? And you remember how I said I felt like a lot of this falls on Wilmer and less so on Matt. That statement by Wilmer even though it's an older statement at this point, and maybe his feelings have changed, I doubt it. It tells me that Wilmer, frankly, could care less about that relationship. It tells me that Wilmer, frankly, doesn't believe that USL is a place to develop players, but simply that it's a place to sign players from, and to have depth pull from, and that's it. He doesn't feel like you can develop a player from USL into an MLS starter, which is interesting to me because we have a player named Memo Rodriguez and Kevin
where
Garcia.
did he come from? Where did he
Kevin
come
Garcia.
from?
Yeah, no.
Where did Wilmer Cabrera restart his coaching career? Oh, that's right, in the USL.
You're right.
So Wilmer, if you really are thinking that, don't give me that BS.
He'd have to watch the show and give a rat's ass. He doesn't. But I mean, I hear that kind of response from Wilmer, and that's what I get out of that, is that his focus is on the MLS club side only, not on player development from I want to see a player at the USL level develop into an MLS player. It's, I want to see a USL player develop into a backup, into a depth, for the Dynamo. It's the number, it's quantity over quality as far as Wilmer's concerned. And
now we know why we're in the situation we're at right now when it comes to depth.
And you remember what I said earlier when you asked me, well, then that's a Matt Jordan thing. I don't think it's a Matt Jordan thing. I think it falls on Wilmer. And I think if Matt Jordan had his way, that players would spend more time in RGV than just one match. And I think Wilmer is the one making those decisions. I don't think Matt gets to make those decisions. I think Matt is in charge of personnel in terms of who gets signed, but not where they play, when they play, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, Darby says, Sean, somebody should ask Wilmer this really tough and pointed question in the aftermatch presser. You can read it.
I don't need to read it. I know what she's trying to say. What I meant by that, just to clarify, is when Edson was saying what he said, the question was about the failure of RGV. And if I'm Wilmer and somebody's asking me a question that essentially boils down to the failure of RGV, I'm going to be pissed. I'm going to hate the question, and I'm going to give a boilerplate response. Whereas if you ask me, how can we improve the relationship with RGV? What can we do to improve the relationship with RGV? What do I view the relationship with RGV? How does that relationship work? In my opinion, is that a relationship that we can ultimately find long-term MLS starters? You frame it that way, where you're kind of giving him the opportunity to give his opinion versus factuals. I think he will receive it better. That, when I say you have to kind of softball pitch it, that's what I mean. Just so Darby knows, that was actually less at Edson and more at Darby. But she's not wrong. And, it's, I don't want the question to be asked to be tough. I want the question to be asked in such a way that we get a good response. And frankly, I don't think we ever are, unless we ask Matt Jordan that question. I feel like I'm going to reach out and try to get him on the show, I guess, is what's going to happen next. Because frankly, we all want to know the answer to the question. It's the question simply boils down to, when it comes to the relationship with RGV, do you feel that players coming out of RGV can be ultimately long-term MLS starters for the Dynamo? Or is it more of, we want to supplement the Dynamo roster with players from RGV so that when we need to call on our depth, we have available depth without having to, without spending a boatload of money there, we can spend it more towards the top and the middle of our roster to fill out our roster that way. And I would be, honestly, I think Matt Jordan would give a pretty honest answer about that, and would probably say it's a little A and a little bit of B. The opportunity to use those funds and roster slots to bring in players from USL level to save a little bit of money there, to then in turn spend that money elsewhere on the roster. I think that appeals to the Dynamo from a front office standpoint and from a Matt Jordan standpoint. But again, it boils down to, if you're going to do that, then why are those players spending time with the Dynamo week in and week out, and then not spending time with RGV. If they're only here for depth, why are you, keeping them at the Dynamo level, not giving them any minutes with the Dynamo first team, and then expecting to call on them and have them play meaningful minutes in an MLS match when they haven't played meaningful minutes in 3 months? So that's how I would approach it. And again, it's as much as I want the question to be asked to Wilmer, based on Wilmer's previous interview questions, and not even that specific question, just other interview questions, I don't expect him to give much of more than a boilerplate response.
No. He's not.
But I think Matt Jordan might be inclined to give a slightly more in-depth response, because I do feel he's been more open and honest about things related to the team and what he does with the team from that aspect.
I still don't agree. What I don't agree with Matt Jordan is this whole time frame of 2-3 years for one player. I just don't think it's enough time to let a player develop and get used to a system.
No, and that's like I said. I mean, you've got to have at least a month, and realistically, if that player's a player you're intending to develop, you need to give them more than a month. They need a few months. I mean, that's the reason why.
I'm talking about for example, where they grab players for the USL team, and you're only given like 2 seasons to prove that you're MLS material. If not, you're out. To me, I just don't think it's enough time.
You only have so many roster slots, and if a player now it's different if you're signing a lot of younger players, then I agree with you, and the Dynamo realistically are. But I think if we're talking mid-20s players, or even reasonably, like 23, 24 players, year-old players, I think then they only deserve 2 years. If they can't figure it out in 2 years,
but I'm talking, but like I'm talking about players like Todd Warden, players like Charlie that excelled at the USL level.
But you say that they weren't given the opportunity for a third or fourth year, but they were. Those players just didn't feel that the offers that were given to them met their expectations of what they wanted to make money-wise. They didn't see the salary benefit that they expected being an MLS player, because they were still a minimum MLS player. And frankly, at that point, they still were. These were not players that were contributing on an MLS team at that point. They were still depth. And I don't expect the Dynamo to sign players to $80,000 a year contracts.
But maybe I used Charlie wrong, but Todd Warden was still a USL player. And he was the best. He was the best player for RGV, being the captain. I feel like the depth for RGV could have been even a whole lot better now with Todd, with Isidro, with Romilio Hernandez. The main issue I have with this 2-3 year cycle is that we constantly have to replace good players with depth players that aren't so great. Whereas if you keep them, you recycle those depth players to bring in even better players, so there wouldn't be as big of a gap between your starting 11 and your depth players. We see even with RGV, when Coach Echeverry has had to use his depth players, our depth players have not responded like they should.
Sure, but here's my thing, and coming from the standpoint of the Dynamo front office, specifically Matt Jordan, the reason you make those decisions where I'm 2 years in, Todd Wharton is kind of the cusp of MLS, but from what I'm hearing, Matt Jordan is hearing, that Todd Wharton is good enough, but he's not going to be a next level player. Okay, you have a limited number of MLS and USL roster slots to sign players to. And your option is Todd Wharton or Carlos Small. Who are you taking at that point? You're taking Carlos Small because he's a younger player, which gives you a higher ceiling. So you have to remember, these decisions aren't made in a vacuum. It's not just I look at Todd Wharton and I go, can I keep him or can I, or do I need to move him on? It's I have another player that I'm ready to bring in to replace Todd Wharton, maybe not the same position, but in a different position that's ready to play, that I believe has a higher talent ceiling and a higher overall talent level. I'm going to bring him in over Todd Wharton. Think about it from a FIFA perspective. Are you going to continue to play a player that doesn't have as high of potential just because you've had him for a couple of years? Or are you going to go try to get another better player?
I would not get rid of one of my best players. No, I wouldn't.
He wasn't our best player.
For
He might have been
yes.
He might have been RGV's best player, but he was not ever a Dynamo best player. And he expected a Dynamo contract at that point. He was not going to be content with an RGV contract. And the Dynamo were not prepared to offer him one. Because in their opinion, he was not ready to be that long-term substitute. So Cisco says it best. Thank you, Cisco, for rewording this for me. If RGV is viewed as a developmental program, then why should I hang on to you if you haven't shown any growth in that time span? And how much developing can you do at 25, 26 years of age? At that point, you need to be developed. You need to be refined. Here's the problem, though. RGV players, for the most part, are players coming out of college. When you're coming out of college, you're already 23, 24 years old, which means you only have 1 or 2 years of development before you're technically reaching your peak as a soccer player. You're reaching that prime age. So you are no better than an RGV USL player. You're not going to be better than an RGV USL player. Callow, absolutely. Yes, 100%. I think if a player is not performing well enough after 2 months, then I think at that point you send them down to RGV and you sign the best RGV player and you call them up. And you let that player play 2 or 3 months down at RGV. If they still don't show that they can improve from that point, then cut them, sign somebody new to the USL level to refill that slot. That's what they need to do. That's the way they should operate.
And I could totally get behind that.
Yeah, and that's my frustration.
Except for Tommy Mack. I don't want Tommy Mack or Sam Shuku.
I mean, at the USL level, though, Tommy Mack could be a revelation.
Maybe.
You never know. And I mean, you guys could use a guy at an attacking mid. Not at a winger, hell no, but attacking mid. I mean, the guy still has some talent.
You know
He's still got some technical ability.
You say that, and you know what just came up to my mind? He could be Wilmer Cabrera Jr.'s mentor.
He could.
And I think that's right now, this is what Wilmer Jr. lacks at RGV. He's very young, and he doesn't have someone like he could learn from to continue to develop even further.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the Copa America. Apparently, it's
1-0, and they were almost getting in a fight if they didn't.
Oh, well, of course they did.
Yeah, it's right behind me.
Well, that doesn't help me. I can't see it.
Well, sounds like
what
technical problem.
No. What channel is it on? I can remedy my
Plus.
Okay. Oh, never mind. Okay then. Well.
Well,
yeah. You're good. No, it's fine.
So, Callow also said, he says, I believe there are players in RGV that are plenty talented enough to be permanent depth at the MLS level. However, I feel like they have been subjected to a system that is a revolving door of coaches and tactics. And when they get here to try, they are not prepared for the system they're coming into.
But you say a revolving door of coaches and tactics. I mean, when you say that, Callow, are you referring to the revolving door between RGV and Dynamo, or are you talking about the revolving door of coaches at RGV? Because there's only been one coach at RGV, with the exception of Wilmer. There's been Wilmer and Gerson.
No. It's been
who?
Wilmer. It's been
and then Junior.
Coach Gonzalez.
But to be fair, Junior was such a shit coach that he should have never been coached to begin with.
I definitely agree with that.
I mean, nobody could argue that. And to be fair,
how he got a job at LA Galaxy, it just I'm just thankful for the Galaxy for taking him away. That's all I can say.
Right. Like, thank you, Galaxy, for making our decision super easy, because he was the worst thing for that.
Yeah, and you know the worst case about it was that Coach Gonzalez was going to continue with RGV, even with all those, even with the lack of tactics, of lack of identity. It was his personal decision, because he got that job offer from LA Galaxy that made us get Gerson Echeverri, which thank you.
which was absolutely an upgrade for sure. And we say that, but we don't know if no, we do know Junior wouldn't have been a great coach in the second half of the season. He'd already proven he wasn't going to be a good coach.
Because he got 1 full year with RGV.
Yep. Let's see. Cisco says, how many players are Elise and Morrow younger than at RGV?
Wait, what? How many
players are Elise and Morrow younger than at RGV? So how many RGV players are they younger than? And I think the answer is probably 75 to 80% of them, because RGV is mostly comprised of younger players, because that's the type of team that Matt Jordan is trying to field down there, trying to pull in down there, is a team of younger players. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as far as how old is Morrow and Elise? How old are they?
22, 23.
All right. So we have at RGV, we got, I think Robert Coronado is, I believe he's 25, I believe. He's 22. So, yeah, because he barely got out of college. I think if anything's older than Morrow and Elise, I would probably assume would be Kyle, maybe? Kyle Adams. No, he's 22 as well. They're all pretty. Connor Donovan, obviously. Connor Donovan is the
elder statesman.
Yeah. Everybody else are like in the 22, 23 years old. Like Chuy Enriquez, he is, I believe, let's see what it says here in the USL website. He's 21. Chuy is 21.
Yeah.
So almost all of the RGV USL squad are younger than Morrow and Manotas.
And that's the thing. I mean, and that's the way it should be. They should be younger, but you still need a player or two that are older, a Connor Donovan, and preferably someone in the attack. And we've talked about that before.
Which was Salazar.
That can basically be that mentor for the other mentor. Players.
The other older guy is Victor Garza.
Victor Garza. That's right.
27.
Yeah. And so again, a Tommy Mack could be great down there. Not just for himself, but for the RGV players.
Hairston.
Hairston could be another player that would benefit from time down there, and frankly benefit the players that are down there, and potentially even Gerson. To have veteran players like that for Gerson, it gives him eyes on the pitch that he can't have otherwise. It gives him eyes in practice that he couldn't have otherwise. Players that have played and can give him, some thoughts that he normally wouldn't get from USL players.
Mm-hmm. If only.
One day it'll get figured out and it'll get worked out. But, I look at that relationship and I go, I know it's something the Dynamo want to succeed, but I don't feel like they know how to make it succeed at this point from a strictly outside looking in perspective. Mm-hmm. I think that, as I've said, I do believe that Matt Jordan knows how to make it work, but I feel like Wilmer just doesn't want to do it that way. And I don't know why that is, because I feel like you said, he would be one of those guys that should be like, oh man, RGV is a great place for these players to get minutes and to get time. But I don't think he really at this point has grasped that players need more than just a match down there. They need time down there to really benefit from it. And so, sorry, this Copa America match is definitely going to catch my attention for a while. So anyways, Cisco says we're in the figure it out phase of all things Dynamo and RGV. And the thing is, you say that
fourth year.
Yeah, well, yes, but as you noted, we can discount the Junior Gonzalez year. We can discount the Owen Coyle year with the Dynamo. We can discount those 2 years. They don't count. And, that really only leaves 2 years. And I feel like that first year was a different tactical approach from the RGV perspective. One of the things I want to say, too, is I feel like if RGV had started out where instead of bringing in these championship players, if they had just brought in players at the development level, I think the entirety of the outlook of RGV is different.
Yeah, because when they brought in players from Arizona United. They brought in players from the USL. They brought in players that were Dynamo reserves. They brought in Charlie from England, from the Stoke City Academy. So they armed themselves to the teeth. And then now all of a sudden we're seeing mostly players out of college, and not necessarily players that have had experience with USL. If you guys understand what I'm trying to get. So the bar was set really high in the first year. I'm guessing they wanted to make an impact in the Rio Grande Valley. They made an impact, but I think the hype that the first year team brought was kind of very hard to equalize, especially the way how the Dynamo have been running things as far as the pipeline.
Yeah, we've talked about that before, that the expectation was set that this team is going to be a competitive championship team year in and year out, and that on paper makes a lot of sense. But when you actually get down to it, and especially as the USL has expanded, it's become a lot tougher to be that. Cisco says we're Dynamo are trying to figure things out in year 14, and Edson's sitting here complaining about year 4. I mean, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. But to a T. Damn, that sounds like a problem for the Dynamo,
and that doesn't look good. If they can't figure themselves out in 14 years, what makes us feel comfortable that they'll figure out RGV soon?
Well, what he was referring to when he says, "Damn, that sounds like the Dynamo to a T," is the high expectations off the bat, and then less so after that.
I'm mostly dealing with what he said about figuring things out in year 14.
I mean, you're not wrong, but I feel like part of that is because they had to approach it completely different once Dom left, because they left it in Dom's hands to kind of run things, and he ran it his way. And so you can get complacent with that a little bit. You can get comfortable with that. You don't have to manage all the little things. But when a Dominic Kinnear leaves, now you have to go manage all those separate things. And when that fell to Canetti to be that guy to manage, and subsequently what ultimately was Owen Coyle's failure, that was never going to be a success. It just wasn't. Callo says he left you a list of RGV player ages on Discord.
Yes, just saw it.
Thank you, Callo. That's awesome. But enough for, well, actually, no. Okay. We're gonna pause this discussion. We'll come back to it. We're gonna pause this discussion because there's one discussion I want to have for sure before the end of the show, and I believe this is a very important discussion. So the U.S. Women's National Team beat England 2-1 today in France to make it to the Women's World Cup final.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that the scoreline was fair, but I also feel that the called back goal, while fair, definitely was a backbreaker for England. I also feel that the penalty that was taken was not well taken. Credit to Alyssa Naher for stopping it, but I don't feel like it was a well taken penalty that late in the game. You got to have a more solid connection. You really have to score that goal. But I think the real story here is after the U.S.'s second goal, scored by Alex Morgan on her birthday, she performed a celebration which, let's be honest, let's be real, absolutely made fun of the England as a women's national team in general.
I want to say more of the nation rather than the team.
I think it was less to make fun of and more to poke fun at. I think there's a difference there. I don't think it was meant to be disrespectful and more just meant to be she knew that, let's be real. She knew that it was going to be newsworthy. She knew what she was doing.
Especially what the timing was. We're 2 days before 4th of July.
Yep. And she wants to be, she wants to be an attention person. She likes the attention because that's essentially money for her. Publicity is publicity.
Yeah.
Callow says VAR has been kind of sucking all my desire to watch the Women's World Cup. If you think it's bad now, just wait until the Men's World Cup in 2 years. It's going to be abysmal and terrible, and I think I'm probably going to cry at that point. Because it's going to screw over probably half the field at some point or another. And it's going to be frustrating, and it's going to be the major talking point for the next World Cup. To
me, it seems like the celebration was kind of as a response to all the attacks and the criticism by Phil Neville, by Piers Morgan, and the media in England of saying that they were pretty much high on the heels. They were too arrogant and this and that. And this was like you've seen the meme of like the tea kind of thing. I think it was more of that kind of thing of like shutting them up and saying, yes, we may be arrogant, but hey, we beat you.
Yeah, it's the, I feel like to some extent it was the response of, yeah, we're arrogant, but we back it up. We can play and prove that we deserve to be, we can be arrogant because we are as good as we are. And I think, to be fair, I think the English media did a disservice to the English women's national team by calling it out and by focusing on it. I think, honestly, that it's going to be fuel for the fire for the women's national team. And so I think it was just stupid by them to basically offer the opportunity to have bulletin board material, if you will. Further, I think my thing with the celebration, it is disrespectful in my opinion, only because you could do that in the final. You don't need to do that in the match against the same team. Yeah, it's at the English media, but at the same time, you're playing the English women's national team. And to me, that it's disrespectful to them. And I know she wasn't probably intending to be that way, but it does come across that way. But to be fair, if England had scored and had the goal stand, that celebration becomes less of a talking point. It becomes a bigger talking point because the U.S. won. If the U.S. lose the match, that celebration goes away and nobody remembers it.
And to be honest, she'd look like an idiot.
She would if they lost, or
yes.
even if it goes to extra time, she would. I wouldn't say idiot, but she would definitely look smarmy and
foolish. I think I meant
foolish.
To say.
Yeah, foolish would be a good word for it.
I'm sorry, Alex Morgan. Please forgive me. I won't do it again. I love you.
But I don't. As much as I feel it was disrespectful to the English women's national team, I don't fault her for it, and I don't think that it was out of place. I feel like the reason I wanted to talk about this, and I wanted to bring this up specifically, is because I want to point something out. The U.S. women's national team has accepted their role as the villains of women's international soccer now. Mm-hmm. They have embraced it. They have made it their identity. We're going to be the team that every other country hates and hates to play. We're absolutely going to be that team that rubs it in your face because we know we're better than them. And after all of this talk these last few years about how many other national teams, women's national teams and women's national programs are catching up and are closing that gap. After all that discussion, we're still here sitting here talking about the U.S. women's national team in another Women's World Cup final versus either Sweden or the Netherlands, and most likely they're going to come out on top again. And I feel like that, even though I hate when teams do this kind of thing, I'm turning around to it, and I'm also going, you know what, as much as I despise it, I really kind of like it because they've adopted that approach of you can't touch us. And until you do, we're going to do whatever the hell we want to do. Until you stop us, we're going to be whatever the hell we want to be, do whatever the hell we want to do. And to be fair, that should be the freaking American way. which is more identity than the men's national team has ever shown in this country, ever.
I find it funny, like you want to touch that topic with the end of a stick with the men's national team.
Oh no, I mean, we could talk about it. They don't have an identity. They are absolutely abysmal. The fact that they could only beat Curacao by 1 goal, and to be fair, looked pretty poor throughout the most of that match. Curacao should have never had as many opportunities as they did. It
just was ridiculous. Like seeing, how Curacao, how limited they were. A couple of their players, tired to the point of cramping. At the 75th minute, and yet they were still able to get a lot more chances on goal against Zach Steffen than you ever did, against Room. I think it was highly ridiculous. I left the stadium extremely pissed off. And so did most of the people that went to the game. They just couldn't believe it. It's like you would expect that, that they were totally, take over and to dominate this match. And they didn't. And then you wonder, like, what is up with Giazi Zardes? Like, if you saw like how horrible he played in this match, and yet you didn't bring in Josie Altidore, like, where is the logic? Especially when he said, when Berhalter said that he was fine to play. It wasn't a fitness issue or anything, so he was good to play. Why didn't you put him in when you know that that Zardes wasn't bringing in anything to the table? It could have jump-started the attack for all we care. We could have used his strength, his upper body strength, to at least put some more pressure on the attack. But no, he didn't bring him in. Like, it was just bad. And I know a lot of people before the match, they were like, "Oh, the Mexico looks beatable since they tied against Costa Rica and went to penalties." The way they played against Curacao, if they were to go past Jamaica and they go against the U.S., I'm sorry, but if they keep playing like that, I don't think they're winning the Gold Cup.
David makes the point that Mexico also played a different team against Martinique. They didn't play the majority of their starters.
I'm talking about no, but they played with most of their starters against Costa Rica.
No, I know, and I was telling you what David said.
No, I know that, and I'm saying it.
No need to get defensive, my dude. No need to get defensive.
I'm getting defensive for both. I don't know how that's gonna make me look.
I mean, you're what we call a fence straddler.
Seems legit.
I didn't mean it like that, bro. I meant like you don't decide one way or the other. That's what I meant by that.
Okay.
It wasn't a slight in any other way.
The reason I went like that because I have gotten that before from Jacob. So.
Okay. Well, that should tell you something, shouldn't it? The fact that 2 people have called you out on it says a little something.
It's not like I care.
And part of that is just, your heritage is Mexican and it is American. It is Mexican American. And that is okay. You're allowed. And I wish people would understand this, as a Mexican American, you're allowed to have loyalty to both. It's okay. Yeah, Cisco, that's what I thought he was pissed off about. And I'm like, I didn't mean it like that.
No, it did not even cross my mind about that.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I probably would have said border wall instead of fence, but whatever. But I want it to be known that I struggle with this. If the U.S. women's national team can be as good as they are, why can't the men's national team be good?
I'm gonna play devil's advocate and say because it took the U.S. I think it took the U.S. in the men's side forever to develop, whereas in the women's side we had a huge head start over everybody else, and that's why we're in the position we're at right now in the women's and not in the men's. If we had the the leagues like the English and the Spanish, I feel like we would be at their level. But how old is
It's
MLS
not.
exactly?
It's not like supporting Arsenal and Chelsea.
It's not. No. I'm talking about like getting the football, the academies and the develop.
I was. Yeah, no. This was sorry. David said in response to the Euro fence straddler, you can't. And when I said it's okay to support both, to be loyal to both, he says no, you can't. It's like supporting Arsenal and Chelsea. The thing I think that's important to remember when comparing these is that the Premier League, you have people that are born and raised and they follow a specific team, not as much because of location, but location plays a part in it, but also because it's a heritage thing. And so the heritage thing is what really, like, people are raised on supporting these teams. It's kind of like the Yankees and Red Sox. You're raised on supporting the Yankees or the Red Sox. When a family comes over from Mexico and they eventually become Mexican Americans, it is okay for them to support the Americans and Mexico because Mexico is their heritage and America is where they are. It is the team they are adopting. It is the country they are adopting as their own. And that needs to be okay.
Yeah, Carlo, but Landon Donovan isn't really Mexican American. He's not from Mexican parents.
No, well, he's referring to his Canadian heritage versus his American life. It's okay to support Canada and America. It's okay. I know that people don't like to think that, but it's okay. That's
national teams are not clubs.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. And it's just different. It is different. That's all I can say about that. Cisco says we need more sucky teams on the men's side like the women have. Spurs will be Cuba in that equation. Shut up. That's so cold, Sergio.
No, David, that is extremely tacky, and I hate those.
Actually, Spurs would be more like Jamaica right now, not Cuba. Thank you very much. Cuba's more like Aston Villa. Oh, snap. I went there.
No. Wouldn't that be?
Yeah, we won't go there.
So Cisco says many of the powerhouses on the men's side are not powerhouses for the women, like Argentina, Mexico, Italy. Why? Because they didn't support for a long time. They didn't support women's soccer. Just take a look at the story that has been being shared along on Twitter about Jill Ellis.
To be fair, Callow, you will always be part American no matter what. Being American is not just about citizenry. That only dictates whether you can play for the men's national team or not. That's all.
Where she had to come to the United States to play because England had zero support for girl and women's soccer.
Talking about Daly?
No, I'm talking about our U.S. women's national team coach,
Jill Ellis. I'm sorry, I tend to forget Jill Ellis is even a thing. I don't care about Jill Ellis. Unfollowed, reported. Whatever, Callow. You love us. But I wanted to talk about the celebration. I wanted to dive into some of this stuff because it's fun to talk about. But I really, like I said, I wanted to point out the U.S. women's national team embracing the villain mindset. We talk about in MLS that MLS needs a team that's the villain, that's the bad guys, if you will. And there's no team right now that is that in
except
MLS.
for Zlatan.
And even then, he's a single guy. LA Galaxy should just embrace it. They should just be okay with being the villains and have all the rest of their players kind of join in the fun of that.
The arrogance.
And I feel like the arrogance. Be okay with being the arrogant assholes of the league. And I just feel like there's too many teams that are afraid to be different. That they want to be a copy of other teams in the league. And I think part of that stems from MLS's front office, where you have individuals in the front office that are dictating how MLS teams need to approach certain things because it is a single entity ownership organization. And until teams are allowed to be themselves and have their own identity and not be controlled by the league, we're never going to see MLS really grow into what it can be. And even with its high growth right now, it could be better. Let's see. Cisco says, speaking of, y'all see his interview the other day, play it on air, about him having more trophies than all of MLS. Edson's looking it up. David says even the U.S. players watch Club de Cuervos.
That's a series on Netflix. So in the last, what he's getting at, in the last season, that's what they did. They were considered like to be like the villains of the league, the fictitious Liga MX, and they at the end of the season they totally embraced that and just went with it. They called themselves the Black Plague.
It's awesome. I want to see. I'll be honest. I want to see an MLS team in CONCACAF Champions League when they get there become the villains. Like, just embrace the fact that we're going to kick Liga MX team's ass, you know? And it needs to be LA Galaxy because I want to see Zlatan have a field day with it.
I found the interview.
Sergio says you have to be good to be the bad guy. And, yeah, we'll play that here in just a second. And you're absolutely right. And I think that's one of the things, too, is that it's a struggle for LA Galaxy to be the bad guys because they're not good enough yet. Even with Zlatan, they're not good enough. And the parity in MLS is great for, you know, the match-to-match play and for fans of the individual teams, because no team is ever truly out of the playoffs, you know, until at least 2/3 of the way through the season. But I want to see teams be more willing to have their identity, to be the bad guy or be the good guy, or, you know, be the savior of the league. At FC Cincy coming in, they could be the savior of the league. You know, when you're facing Zlatan, go for it. Let Zlatan be his asshole self, and you totally play to it. Like, you know, come up with a goal celebration around it. Come up with advertising around it. You know, we're gonna slay the lion, king of the jungle, no more. You know, things like that. Just go for it. Have fun with it. But this is MLS, and MLS, you don't get to have fun anymore. And you don't get to have fun in terms of advertising or marketing or poking fun at individual players or other teams.
Even with the social media accounts, have you seen, like, sometimes, like, I'm trying to remember who was the one that tried to go above and beyond when it comes to, like, the snarkiness, and FC Cincinnati got all butthurt.
I think it was
Portland. It was Portland, I believe.
Yeah, it was Portland. Yeah, because Portland does that. They don't mind from a social media standpoint because they're run by Merritt Paulson and he's okay with it. But, you know, I don't know. I want to see some identity in the league. I want to see identity with teams because I think it's more fun. And I'm okay hating players. Why does Callow have a wrench next to his name? Did you report him?
No.
Oh, you made him a moderator. Nice.
That Michael Bradley quote, just that was it for him to be a moderator.
Sergio says, didn't they lose 7-1? Callis says, I hate Zlatan, but I love to hate Zlatan, so it can't be bad to have him in the league. That's exactly how I feel about Zlatan. I hate him because he's so arrogant, but then I love him because I hate him. Like, I love to hate him. And I love him because he's so arrogant, and he knows it, and he's okay embracing that.
So I hate Zlatan for his arrogance, but yet I have a FIFA Ultimate Team style cutout of him in my car that my friend made me. So let's see what he said.
But it's working,
put
though,
a lot
isn't
of
it?
pressure. That's my game. I did everywhere. United, Juventus, Barcelona, Milan. That's the environment I came from. And I said I come here because I want a lot. I don't come here to relax, and that's who I am. And so far I won 33 trophies. That's probably more than the whole MLS won together. So I know what I'm doing, trust me.
See, you know, you look at this, the way he does his interviews, like, he's serious, you know, where he's saying, I'm not here to relax. I'm not here on vacation. I'm not here to retire. Like a lot of people in Europe say about the Europeans that come and play in MLS, like Zlatan, like Rooney. And obviously he's gonna add his own little twist to it, and his style, and then say, yes, I come here to do the best that I can to win trophies. I've won 33, which is more than everybody else, and that's why he says, I know what I'm doing. I know how to win championships, and that's what I want to do with LA Galaxy. And that's basically how he is. Like it's the arrogance, but at the end of the day, he's not lying. We've seen that he came to LA Galaxy to work his salary and earn and continue his winning tradition, if you want to call it like that.
And the thing is he's not just resting on his laurels. He's not okay being, he's not okay just being another guy on the team. He's working in putting in the time and effort, on the pitch. He's proven it with quality goals. He's not retiring the way he's playing. That's for sure. And it's just impressive to see the fact that he could still play at that level, still give you those types of minutes. But then I turn around and I say, yeah, but the Dynamo shut him down the first time they played him here in Houston when he had tremendous fan support here in Houston. But I don't know. I just feel like MLS needs more of the, not necessarily just specifically the arrogance, but they need more players in teams that are willing to have that identity that's not the good guy identity,
And I think I recall you mentioning the same thing, but with Kyoto.
Yeah.
Like you wanted him to embrace his arrogance, but back it up on the field.
Yes, absolutely yes. Because, hey, look, okay, he's a good player. He's got a lot of talent. Okay, be willing to be that, because mentally, when you have a bad moment or you have a bad match, if you're the arrogant asshole, you have to back it up. And, he was for a while. He's not right now. He was for a while. But I also feel like he could if he embraced that. Like, I think his mental struggles, I think, come from him trying to be what the Dynamo want him to be in terms of having a calm head, being a chill guy, being, an okay role model for kids, and, not being the asshole on the pitch. I think the Dynamo are kind of pushing that on him, but that's not his style. That's not who he is as a player. And to me, that causes him to struggle. And I just, I don't like seeing players that are kind of pushed into a certain mindset or a certain mentality when they've proven they can be better than that.
What did you see?
Almost just saw Messi score a goal. It was about to be amazing, but it wasn't. It was okay.
Let's stop blaming Messi for Argentina's failures. And I'm not a fan of Messi, but I just have to say that.
You're not wrong. Okay. So let's see. How much time we got?
15 minutes.
15 minutes. All right, guys. I want to say this real quick. If you've enjoyed this show tonight, if you've enjoyed the chat, if you've enjoyed hanging out and talking with us, if you've enjoyed what we've talked about, if you agree with some of the stuff we've talked about, do us a favor, like this video, share the stream, share the video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, although most of you I'm sure have, and let people know that we air every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central, except when there's a Dynamo match that Tuesday. Then we'll switch it up. But it's your support that helps us continue doing what we do. It really is. So for that, I just want to say thank you guys very much. And I want to say this. What do you guys want us to talk about for the last 10 and a half minutes or so, or I guess 13 to 14 minutes of this show?
Hey, Sean.
Yes.
So you mentioned about, becoming a character. Do you think I should become the pessimistic character of Generation Orange?
What do you mean become the pessimistic character?
Like fully embrace it. Like just be your antagonistic.
Embrace devil's advocate, man. Embrace it. Just make it your own. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I really am.
Oh, yeah. Cisco brings up something good that you wanted to talk about. Supporters group.
That's right. So supporters group. So
thank you, Cisco.
Oh man. And we are ending it at 9 because I've got a hard stop at 9 tonight, or at least 9:10. But excuse me. Hold on one second. No hiccups. Go away. So the supporters groups are expanding down to 115 and 116. So they will have 215, 216, 115, 116 as well.
Wait. Expanding?
Expanding, yes.
Oh,
yes.
So they can't fill up their current. And this is no diss, because I know you guys are trying. You as Texan Army are trying to work on that. But you're trying to expand a section when you can't fill the current section. How is that going to work? I thought when I heard about this, I thought that it was going to be a relocation to the lower bowl. I think, to me, it made sense for right now, and then as numbers grew back up, they would expand back up to the second bowl.
No, it's an expansion, and let me explain why they need to do this. There's a couple of reasons. Number one, they can't really sell those seats regularly anyways, in 115 and 116. It's usually pretty spotty in terms of attendance there. Number two, you have a lot of fans both in and outside of the supporters groups that have ranted continuously before now about how the supporters groups need to be moved because having the 215, 216, the sound is not strong enough to impact the match. The visual, you don't get to see them as much. They can't, it's not as front and center because they're kind of up. They've been pushed out. Cisco and I actually talked about this yesterday or the day before. And one of the things I mentioned is from a supporters group standpoint, when I look at Texan Army and El Batallon, and this is actually more towards El Batallon and not meant as a slight, it's just kind of how things have played out. I feel like the supporters groups are more of a background noise thing than actually having some sort of impact on the atmosphere or the match itself at this point. Mm-hmm. Now, I think if we're talking the Robertson days, it's totally different, and even the early days in BBVA. But I think now they've kind of become just background noise. One, there are no
acoustics.
Not acoustics. Forget that for a second. When the match is happening, there is no change and no chants that are specific to things that happen in the match outside of when a specific player scores goals. Mm-hmm. When Tomas scores a goal or Elise scores a goal, they have a chant specifically for that. That lasts for about 30 seconds, and that's it. Mm-hmm. They have a chant that's specific to when the team scores a goal. They have a specific chant they play then, and they have a specific chant that they typically start a match with. And that's about the extent of game moment or match moment things that the supporters groups and specifically El Batallon kind of, where they kind of impact or not impact, but they kind of have a, focus on how they're going to go about things in that way. I don't think that I think that that's kind of the La Barra style is to, we're just going to chant for 90 minutes. We've got our chants. We've got our set list. We've got our music. We're going to be that background noise. And in talking to Cisco, one of the things that I said, it's kind of reminiscent of the Vuvuzelas at the Brazil World Cup because it's just background noise. It's just there in the periphery. South Africa. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I got the two mixed up, but you're right. Yes, South Africa. But it's not, it's flavor.
It's not something that actually motivates the team to do good.
It doesn't have an impact on the match in any way, shape, or form. And it's not something that I think that, it's not something that I think that El Batallon can solve themselves. I think it's going to require a lot of different pieces to come together to really make a difference with that. But it's one of those things that I see. And so coming back to why I think it's important to do the expansion that they're doing, I know that John Walker, Deanna Witter, in the front office, this new front office, they want to expand the supporters sections and the supporters groups and the attendance in that area, and also the optics that provides, because right now it's piss poor and it makes the team look like they're not doing anything to embrace the supporters groups. And I think up until recently, it could be said, recently being this season, it could be said that at times the front office would make decisions that were questionable regarding the supporters groups, and were not taking into account what was best for the supporters groups. But it's at some point this had to take place, because they need to move the supporters groups down. And once they do, they need a place that the groups can expand to. I think this is partially John Walker and Deanna Witter believing that they have a tactic and a strategy moving forward, a specific one in mind, that can help fill out the supporter sections. All 4 of them now. And they believe that this approach that they have, which is a strategy they have developed since coming here, and a strategy that they are going to continue working on and working through moving forward. And so, hold on, I'm just reading a few things.
Yeah, okay.
One of the things that was said, sorry, I need to come back to this. One of the things that was said that I've been told by multiple parties is that John Walker and Deanna Witter, one of the things that they took away from the trip that they had to Los Angeles to meet with LAFC's supporters in their front office, is that the LAFC supporters section and their supporters groups are not limited to just one group or 2 groups or even 3 or 4. They have a lot of different groups, and they have a lot of people that represent different cultures, different styles of support. Different mentalities when it comes to support. And why is this important? Is he taking another penalty? He is. Hold on. Moment of pause for. It's not a penalty. It's a free kick. Moment of pause for Messi brilliance, I hope, because I would love to see a Messi goal right here. It'd be fantastic. Come on, Messi. Make this a little faster, please. Okay, thanks. That was actually a pretty good kick. It was on target. Okay. So
it's a little behind on my end, but okay.
I mean, you didn't miss much. I mean, it wasn't that great of a free kick, but at least it was on target. But I think this front office is going to be at a bit of a learning curve for a while. But that one of the things they're trying to do is they're trying to embrace that, and Darby said it, they're trying to embrace that model from LAFC and from how they've kind of structured their supporter group cultures and things like that, and how they're supporting their supporters groups to do that with the ones we have here. And I think it's important, and I hope people take this away, especially those that are supporters or have thought about becoming a supporter, that this front office embraces the idea that supporters culture is integral to the success of the team. And they want to see the supporters culture and supporters groups, plural, succeed and grow and become a bigger thing and a bigger facet to the game. It's important because I feel like at times there's this misunderstanding, or I feel like at times, at least before with the previous regime, that there was a very big perception that the front office didn't like the supporters groups, or at the very least didn't feel like they needed to support them fully because it was on the supporters groups to expand, not the front office to help them expand. And so I'm hopeful that this actually will have a positive benefit over the long term. I think it's not going to be an overnight thing. Now Cisco says, can you help explain the fee too for people that don't understand? So there's going to be a couple of different changes. So number one, there's going to be an annual fee that is now going to be required if you want to be part of the supporters section in BBVA. Now, this fee is separate from the fee that, say, Texian Army charges to their members to become a member of Texian Army. It's going to be separate than a fee that if EB had a fee that they would charge their members. This fee is specific to the Dynamo and specific to having tickets and being able to buy tickets in the supporters section. Why is this important? Because the last few seasons, tickets have been sold in the supporters sections that were not for supporters. And so you ended up having a lot of people that sat in the section and didn't actually join in the chanting, didn't actually join in the game day experience. They were content to be casual fans, if you will. Mm-hmm. So with that fee, right? So that fee is $35 a year. that's basically $2 a match, roughly, as far as the supporters fee, or the fee to be a supporter of the Dynamo. So where does that money go to? A part of it goes towards them instituting this new program. The rest of that, which is actually a pretty decent amount, goes towards some of these things that the front office actually wants to do next year, such as helping to support and not sponsor, but support the TIFO, creation of TIFOs. They want to support with sponsorships for buses going for the FC Dallas matches next year. They want to support with game day activities centered around the supporters groups, and things like that. So what I'm really, really trying to get at, and it's really, really, really important here, is that the Dynamo are trying to do what they can to improve what's going on with the supporters groups. And what have I said for the last 2 or 3 years? That if the front office is going to make these steps, it's on the supporters groups and fans to show that these steps are worthwhile, and that by making these changes and pushing these changes and trying to be proactive, that we respect that they're doing that, and we're willing to help them as best we can. And so, look, I want to see what happens next season. I have a lot of good feelings about next season. You do have to pay the fee, Thomas. You have to pay the $35 for the year. But as the $35, you also get a member scarf, which I think actually, even though it's the member scarf, I think they want to make it a supporters group scarf. So it'll say you're an official supporter as opposed to just saying a Dynamo 365 member. I think that's one of the things they want to do. Don't quote me on that. I think that's what they want to do, if they get enough people that do it. That goes towards you having access to the supporters groups concession stands, which that concession stand at 115, 116 is supposed to be exclusive to supporters group members. And yes, that you, in order to get the single game rate for supporters section, you have to have
2-0 Brazil.
Yeah, I just saw you have. It was that Gabriel Jesus yeah, he was the one that passed it to Paulinho. Is that Paulinho that scored?
I think so.
Or Coutinho? Was it Coutinho, not Paulinho?
Philippe Coutinho?
Coutinho. No, that wasn't Coutinho.
No.
I don't know who that was. Some young kid who looks amazing. Who is that?
Firmino.
That's not Firmino, is it?
Yeah, he scored. Firmino.
Oh, it was. Wow, he looks different. I don't know why. It's the haircut. He looks a little different. He looks younger. That's not Firmino. Is that Firmino?
The one who scored?
Yeah, it is Firmino. He doesn't look like Firmino. We're getting way off topic. But so the next question is, if I buy a ticket on StubHub, can I get in this section? I'm going to tell you guys right now that they're going to crack down on who can make it into the section and not. There's a lot of information that is in the email that went out to supporters members and those that are part of the supporters section. Somebody just got sent packing. It's probably Argentina's coach or assistant coach. I don't know. But Messi looks dejected as hell. It's fantastic.
35 for single.
What'd you say?
They asked about Ticketmaster.
Oh yeah. So and then the other thing is, if you pay that $35, you also get discounted tickets. Your ticket price for the single game tickets is going to be your oh, do we have a call?
Yes, we do.
Oh snap! Hey guys, we're ending at 9, so sorry you're too late. I'm just kidding. We'll take the call.
Welcome to Generation Orange. Who are we speaking with?
Ray from South Texas Border Sport.
How you doing, Ray?
Hola, Ray.
Doing good, Edson. I'm glad you made it back down to Houston in one piece.
I survived Philly. That's all I can say.
You survived Justin. Let's be real.
He survived cheesesteaks.
That's true.
All right, Ray. So what would you like to talk about?
Let's talk Dynamo for a bit here. You know, now they finally get a little home match, but then they have to hit the old Willie Nelson Classic on the road again. for like a lot of games. 15 games, 40 days, some awful stretch like that.
Around there.
Yeah.
So, and one of the topics that's been brought up is the depth situation, whether they get all the Gold Cup participants back or not for these next set of road games. It remains to be seen. But the thing that does give me a lot of concern is the way they've been utilizing the depth. And I kind of have to agree with Cisco a little bit with his commentary that maybe they need to freshen up the ideas a little bit and ignore what they've been going with. I mean, and what better time than to do it on the road? I mean, not necessarily here at home against whoever they've got, but I believe that if the Dynamo really want to upstart their season, they should experiment something on the road.
I just feel like, and I've mentioned it before, I just feel that Wilmer Cabrera is kind of too stuck, and I've mentioned it to you as well. He's too stuck on his ideal formation, on his ideal tactic. Like it's rare to see him kind of modify the way the Dynamo plays to react, or to not even react, to get ahead of his rival. And you see it a lot, especially on the road, where he becomes very, very conservative in his play style.
And I do agree with it. I mean, the last few games that I've seen, like that they've performed on the road, man, have they been punished? And let's just say the San Jose game may have just been a bit of an indicator that may have been just a hospital job. Because easily San Jose, with the way they've been playing and hitting their form as of now, they've easily could have put another 4 goals past them.
Oof. I don't know. I mean, I really get your point. And like, I saw the match. I don't know why.
Well, let's just say that, okay, San Jose was also entering a long streak of games in a certain amount of days themselves as well. But, of course, they were going to have the advantage of playing at home.
Yeah.
Okay? So let's just say that San Jose has they're finding their footing with Coach Matias Almeida, who we're both very familiar with from watching Liga MX every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I feel that San Jose match could have been, by the scoreline, yes, it was a bit misleading. Even in the New England game, it just seemed like we could have had something out of it. We really could have, but it's just the depth that it's just not properly utilized. You know, I mean, they play a 4-4-2, and maybe they could play a 4-4-2 diamond midfield. Who knows? Mm-hmm. I mean, I just don't know what's behind that philosophy.
Yeah, and we were just talking about it, that mentality that Wilmer has, it kind of spreads into his decisions on RGV, because it's all of it. Just seems like all he cares about it. Like a lot of people might say, well, that's the whole point. All he cares about is the Dynamo and what the Dynamo gains from it. But yet you say that, and it seems like he hasn't gotten the groove as far as depth is concerned, because without the Hondurans, without Struna, without AJD, without our starters in general, our depth players just haven't been up to snuff. And it's apparent when you got wingers like Tommy Mack and Marlon Hairston, who by no means are the same have the same capabilities, have the same style as Elise and Kyoto, but you want to play the same as if you still had Elise and Kyoto, then
Yeah, I look at Tommy Mack and Harrison as more like middle of the pitch guys that can probably do the damage in the middle instead of like flanking them on the outside wing. I mean, maybe that's just a point that I get from watching both players.
so he would be like the competition for Tomas Martinez rather than for Romel Kyoto.
Correct.
Well, I just hope Wilmer Cabrera was kind of open to that kind of analysis, because you do have a point, and even Sean brought that up earlier in the show, saying that he viewed Tommy Mack as more as a middle of the field kind of player rather than the wing.
And to continue adding to Strong's point, I mean, when he played with NYFC, that's where he kind of did his the more where he was like very successful, like more in the middle of the park and creating opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, because his speed isn't good enough for being a winger, and it seems like his play style kind of clashes with everybody else. But
yeah, I mean, I just think that Tommy Mack is one of those hold him up type things and try to reinvigorate the attack type thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily look at him as a holding mid, but more of a guy like, okay, maybe there's a shot that like blocked and it comes back to like the middle of the pitch.
Yeah,
he might be the one to like reorchestrate everything and get the offense going again.
Yeah, no, you're right. I just hope the Wilmer understands it. I think at the end of the day, we like saying in Spanish, podemos decir misa. Like we could say a lot about this whole ordeal.
Yeah, we can sing the masses.
Yeah, but if Coach Wilmer Cabrera doesn't understand it or doesn't see that, then the whole point is mute. Especially the fact, like we said, like he is one that really doesn't really care about what other people think about his style or whatever. But all right, man, you got anything else first today?
No, that was just like the 2 cents I wanted to give in on this whole Dynamo depth thing, because yes, we do have the depth. I just think it's just not properly being utilized.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I agree with that. I know a lot of people on the chat, and even Sean knows that too. It seems like, and I think it's best summarized with what Sean said a while back. He said Wilmer Cabrera wants quantity over quality in his depth in the way he's running things, and we're seeing it. We have a lot of players in the depth, to have technically have two starting 11s and then some, but the quality isn't there, and that's what gets us when we need these depth players. That's what can get us results. Yes, you have all these players, but if they're not good enough to stand up to the plate when your regular starters aren't available, whether for call-ups or for injuries or for suspensions, then what's the point of having you here?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest fear is that for tomorrow night's lineup, we may just see all of the regulars and Salazar not even be on the team sheet. That's just my biggest fear.
I don't know. He's looked better than Ronaldo Pena.
Well,
He's
that
looked
is
better
true.
than he's looked better than Pena, Tommy Mack, Hairston, half the roster.
Well, Sean, I mean, look, ideally, yes, he's looked better than all those guys. I mean, but I just get the hunch that they just need a result at home, and thus Salazar may just be one of those casualties.
I don't know.
That he may not make the team sheet.
I
I mean, that's just me.
I think it'd be unfair, but like at the end of the day, it's all about Wilmer Cabrera. And knowing Wilmer Cabrera, I have a feeling you're 100% right about that.
I mean, I know both teams, Toros and Dynamo, the road form has been poor as of late, but they really, really need a result at home.
Yeah.
And it's going to be an interesting night tomorrow night for both clubs. Mark it down.
Of course. So, yeah, tomorrow. And they're both so Toros play at 10:30 against Reno 1868. 9:30 will be the Dynamo versus New York Red Bulls. So hopefully we can actually get a decent result. More than anything, the Toros, because I think after their loss against Austin Bold last week, they need some sort of motivation to kind of make up those points. But all right, man. Thank you, Ray, for your input on the Dynamo. Like I said, it's always good to hear your analysis on the teams, whether it's RGV or the Dynamo. But we've got to wrap up the show for tonight.
Thank you guys for giving me the platform. And tomorrow's a very busy day. Well, the rest of the week's a very busy week for me. A certain team, 2 teams from Mexico coming into town, and I hope to have some material for you guys to chew on tomorrow, especially you, Edson. Hopefully it's another cheesesteak type material.
Definitely appreciate it, man. But thank you so much for all you do, and just keep going at it, man. Hope have a good night, and we'll keep on talking we'll keep on talking soon.
All right, thank you guys. Have a good night.
All right,
have a good one, Ray.
Bye.
You too, Sean.
All right, cool. Good show.
All right,
wrap it up.
It's a wrap because Mexico's gonna play in a couple of minutes.
Oh, nobody cares about Mexico playing.
Well, you know what they say.
Except you and David. That's about it.
Well,
But seriously, guys, thanks for joining us. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being active in chat. As we always say, being active in chat, engaged in chat, it makes the show go by a lot faster. I can't believe it's been 2 hours, 15 minutes. It does not feel like it.
No, it doesn't.
We really do appreciate you guys, and I hope to talk to you guys again next week. Like I said, I am going to try to see if I can get somebody from sales or the front office even on next week to discuss the changes, the pricing changes and things like that. I'll see what I can do. But guys, again, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. And let's make this a short closeout tonight. Just hashtag Forever Orange, hashtag Somos Toros, hashtag -TF on, and hashtag
We Are Gen Orange.
Yeah, We Are Gen Orange. That sounds good.
All right, guys.
Have a good night, guys.
Take care.